Did you know you can just buy your own trophy? And here we were in high school trying hard. But now that we have one, I'm going to give it away to the best grill option under or around $500. Let's get into it. So I'm going to break today's video into 3 categories of grills. This is because everybody is looking for something different. So I'm going to go through 3 categories, including automation, grills that can drive themselves, no user input required, a smoker option, as well as an all-in-one grill. Give some pros, some cons, and comparisons having used all of these in terms of what might be the perfect fit to help you find a new grill companion in 2024. So let's start with automation, since those are the 2 grills sitting behind me at the moment. So behind me I have the Z Grill 700 2C 2E pellet grill, which depending on the day that you check the website can be found for $529. It goes up and sort of down depending on sales and deals that are on, but when I checked this is $529. I was informed that this would be updated to include Wi-Fi, but looking at the website, it actually looks like it's not going to be an update that was rolled out to the grill that I have, or if you already have one, but for an additional $100+, that is a premium option. So that is now starting to get 40% out of range of $500. So just pay note to that in terms of the sale price. My intention here is not to say it's $500 and it actually ends up costing you close to $700. So I am only looking at the model that I have, the 700 2C 2E, which is non-Wi-Fi. Comparing that to the charcoal option, so choice between fuel here of pellets and charcoal, is the Masterbuilt Auto Ignite 545 series. So both of these grills offer a similar cooking real estate depending on whether or not the manufacturer is including the top rack or the main cooking grate. I'm not really including the top rack, particularly on pellet grills where you have a very thin door. The temperature sort of evaporates very quickly on the upper cooking grate. So I'm only focusing on the primary grate here as the useful cooking area. But if you want to use that for a warming tray, or if you've got some ribs that are done, you want to keep them warm, move them up there. Both of these grills have that as an available option. So if you're comparing to these 2 grills to one another, what are some of the factors that would go into making a decision? So obviously the first one I mentioned already is fuel type. So we have pellets as well as lump charcoal, briquettes, or even real wood is something that I've ran in my Masterbuilt. So it can burn all 3 of those. So you've got fuel source. You also have to look at maximum temperature. So while both of these are controlled with smart electronics that can run stable temperatures all day, and you don't need to be worrying about fussing with vents or dials, and the grill can take over and control everything from on here out, the Z Grills has a high temperature setting. So the maximum on the dial is 375 degrees, and then there's a max temperature, which was just getting me up into the 400 to 500 degree surface temperature when I checked that with the IR gun. Perhaps again, that's a limitation of the fuel source. The compressed dust that is made out of real wood to make pellets doesn't pack as much BTU as charcoal. Charcoal can burn at upwards of 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. So the Masterbuilt Auto Ignite is actually able to achieve a higher temperature. So this has a temperature range of up to 650 degrees, which is your air temperature inside the grill. But if you need even hotter, you can actually use the cast iron top on the mini hopper located inside for giving something like your steaks a quick sear. Speaking of the mini hopper, let's talk about the capacity. So the mini hopper inside of the Auto Ignite can hold either briquettes, which I believe the claim is up to about 8 hours of runtime, whereas with something like lump charcoal, you're getting in and around the 5 hour of burn time. The pellet hopper on the Z Grills can hold more. So depending on the climate that you're running in, but I've had no issue completing a brisket cook in 12 hours and I still had a few pellets left over. So if you're comparing these 2 grills with the expectation of 0 interaction required once you turn it on, the Z Grills has a slight advantage here in terms of burn time with an extra 4 hours comparing pellets to briquettes. You would have to move up to something like the Gravity series to get a larger hopper, but this has been personally for me no issue to be able to add supplemental charcoal throughout the cook. And one of my favorite ways to use this grill is to actually start with real wood and get the benefits of that wood smoke, whether it be ribs or brisket that I've cooked. It was absolutely amazing on the auto ignite, and then add the charcoal for the longevity. So this is going to require 1 stop at the gas station for fuel versus 0 stops at the gas station for fuel. So we've covered a cooking space capacity, hopper capacity, the price point, the useful temperature range. Last but not least, let's talk about one of the most important categories, which is fuel flavor. This is where there is not an insignificant difference between the two. You might be going grid space, price depending on the day. You can get close to about $30 the same price. Wi-Fi, no Wi-Fi. So there's some pros and cons kind of going back and forth, if not slightly stacked in the auto ignite's favor. When you get to flavor though, if this was a tiebreaker, not that it's a tie at this point, this is where the auto ignite is amazing in terms of the flavor. Is packing a big punch in a small grill. I had the benefit of testing many different categories, including offsets to Kamados to kettles to pellet grills, and this punches the closest to an offset flavor, if particularly when burning pure wood out of the box with no modification necessary, jumping straight into the realm of offset flavor. I'm not going to say it's matching offset, but for a grill that runs itself and the temperature stay nice at table, you don't have to fuss with anything. I am completely blown away at the smoke and the food flavor. Plus, I also find the useful temperature range of up to 650 degrees Fahrenheit more useful for more cooks. So not only is the auto ignite a little bit less money, it comes with Wi-Fi, and it has a higher useful temperature range. I'm going to say on food flavor alone, if we didn't evaluate any of those other criteria, my automation pick for the best grill under $500 in 2024, sitting right here, the auto ignite 545. Okay, next, let's talk smokers. And this one is an exciting one for me, I know as well, many of you. But quick note of clarity, this is an illustration only. The Oklahoma Joe's Highland is the offset that I'm using here at $349. If you wanted to go to something like the Old Country G2 offset smoker, that would cost 4 times our budget. So I'm not including it in today's test, it's just here for a visual reference. Also in the category will be the Weber Smoky Mountain 22-inch at $499. So the Weber Smoky Mountain came out in 1981. The first commercially available offset came out in 1983. So both these grills are nearly as old as I am, and they offer a completely unique take on smoking in the backyard. Now, how you pick between the two of these is going to come down to a couple factors. So first, price. The Oklahoma Joe's Highland is less expensive. Next is going to be cooking real estate. So depending on how you look at that, the Oklahoma Joe's Highland has nearly double what a single cooking grid in the Weber Smoky Mountain has, but it comes with 2. So there's actually a real estate advantage inside the Smoky Mountain. If you're going to say, well, it's not really fair to include 2 levels, I would also preface that with on something like the Highland or any offset for this matter, you don't get the entire useful grid space as usable. If you have the hot fire coming right out of the firebox, I would normally place something like a water pan in my Oklahoma Joe's Highland down low to help temper some of those hot gases. And if you've done some of the mods that I've done, like a semi-insulated firebox, extending the chimney to get a little bit better draw, and lowering the air collector intake down to grid level to get sort of that rainbow arc, if you will, of an offset, what you create here in that sort of direct flow setup though is a bit of a hot spot coming right out of the firebox, as well as another hot spot down where that collector is. And speaking of that collector and the modifications, I would say those are absolutely worth it. I invested an additional $50 on top of the $349 US, and I was able to build my own semi-insulated firebox by using fire bricks, bought an exhaust muffler as my extension to get a bit better draw on the chimney, and by lowering the collector down to grate level, I was able to completely transform the performance of my Highland offset to produce food comparable to grills costing 10 to 20 times more expensive. The only downside to that is the size of the firebox, which drives the size of the wood splits that you're able to burn in order to achieve those great results. I have plenty of grills that burn charcoal. So for me, if I'm gonna have an offset, I don't want to be burning charcoal and smoldering some wood for flavor. So by burning a real wood fire, that meant I had to break my splits down to about 6 inches in size and a couple inches in diameter. And that would only last about every 15 minutes or so before I was tending to the fire and adding additional splits in order to keep that going. That may not sound too bad, but on an entire brisket cook, this is all day chained in very close proximity to the offset. If that's what you want, have confidence knowing that you can turn out food tasting the full offset experience. Is just going to be a sacrifice of your day spending every 15 minutes interacting with the fire. The Smoky Mountain, on the other hand, while it doesn't have offset quality flavor, it has pretty amazing smoke flavor. This is because it balances efficiency without going overboard on efficiency. So there are grills that I've tested, I can run up to 56 hours on a full basket of charcoal. Something like the Weber Smoky Mountain is not insulated, and in cool weather, you could be running sort of 8, 9, 10 hours for a maximum load of charcoal before needing to supplement that and add additional fuel. But if I learned anything in the last couple of years, fuel is flavor. So adding fuel sort of on that 8-9 hour window, I think is a good trade-off, especially compared to every 15 minutes or so in an offset. So if you had to choose between the two of these, if you want the absolute best smoke flavor, I would say take a look at the offset. If when I'm explaining a brisket in a day spent tending to your fire every 15 minutes doesn't appeal to you, then I would say you can't go too wrong with something like the Weber Smoky Mountain, where you're gaining lots of space, some easy to control vents, and sort of an 8 to 9 hour reprieve from needing to interact with your fire, and can still get pretty remarkable results. Grills like this dominate sort of the competition barbecue scene. So whether it's a Smoky Mountain or a barrel, but these can be modified with barrel accessories. So Hunsaker, for example, makes a vortex that can unlock some additional performance. You can get rib hanging racks and a whole bunch of other fun things. And so if you haven't ever toured a competition barbecue scene, you're gonna see a lot more products like a Smoky Mountain or a barrel than you are going to see an offset or some of the automation grills behind me. So how do you pick then? Well, if this is going to be your first grill, you're coming from maybe propane and you're brand new to fire management, I would say look at something like the Smoky Mountain way before considering an offset and signing up for the fire management. There's just so much to learn that you may get frustrated and give up before you get the full benefit. You can always increase your complexity later on. So for example, if I've been doing this for over 15 years, I personally might jump to offset if I didn't have one already, because I have other grills, other flavor profiles that I'm accustomed to, and I want to pursue sort of that pure wood burning flavor experience. An offset might appeal to someone like me, or if you identify with that sort of as your buying criteria, then you could do no wrong with an offset. For everybody else, pay attention to competition barbecue and why drums and Smoky Mountains dominate this scene. They're easy to use, they cook quick, there's a world of modifications and accessories, an ecosystem available to them, and they don't take up much space in the backyard. So again, we're looking at two comparable cooking grid sizes and two very different footprints. So now that we've covered automation as well as smokers, let's go into our last category, all-in-one. So we have some great options in what I'll call the all-in-one grill category. I'm calling all-in-one not an official marketing term that any manufacturer uses, but this is the sort of Lord of the Rings of the backyard barbecue space, which is one grill that can do everything. And so depending on your definition of everything, we have everything from a $99 Weber kettle to something like $200 for the Acorn Kamado, or behind me there, the Kamado Joe Jr. at $499, sometimes available on sale like it is right now for $299. But all three of these are available under $500. If you want a couple more options, since I had a Weber beside me as well, you can could look at something like a Weber Performer Deluxe or Performance Edition, also available under that $500 price point, which has a lot of real estate at 22 inches to work with versus something like the 13.5-inch grid space on something like the Joe Jr. and or the Acorn Kamado. So how do we choose between these? Well, I've done a couple tests before, particularly between the Joe Jr. and the Weber kettle, and the Weber kettle is what I started on. So I have very fond memories of that, but it doesn't, for me, give the same performance for all-night cooks like a brisket or a pork shoulder. It doesn't have the ability to reach the high temperatures. So there's in the instruction manual from Weber, it says not to take your enamel coating sort of up into that 700-degree Fahrenheit range, even though myself included, many people have, and I personally have not encountered any damage. I can't in good conscience recommend that you do that, particularly when it's in the instruction manual on the original kettle that I had not to do that. So for me, the all-in-one is sort of falling between the Acorn and the Kamado Joe Jr. because the Kamado, I've used this analogy before, is the sport utility vehicle of the grilling and smoking space. A sport utility is not a pickup truck, it's not a sports car, or it's not a fuel efficient car like a Prius, but you can get models that do a little bit of all those things really well. And that's why the sport utility vehicle is the best selling category in North America. And that is why I think the Kamado form factor, particularly if this is your first grill, makes a lot of sense. I have a soft spot, so bias aware, bias alert here. I love my little Kamados. So whether I've done tests with the Green Egg, the Acorn, or the Kamado Joe Jr., there's not much that these little smokers can't do. I've done a full Packer brisket in the Joe Jr. I've done a couple racks of ribs, to full spatchcock chicken, to now that I've found rotisserie and or pizza options. This little grill can do everything and is portable to go with you on tailgating, camping, or down to the beach if you've got a spare set of hands to carry it, because at 70 pounds, they do get heavy pretty quick on longer distances, anything outside of a couple yards. So depending on what you're looking for, hopefully that gives you some information based off of your buying criteria to help you find the right grill for you. But for me, for the all-in-one, in part why you see so many Kamados around here is I genuinely do believe that is the best all-in-one solution at giving you the ability to do pizza, steak, rib, brisket, chicken, burgers, everything that you name it in a single grill. On the smoker side, depending again if it's your first grill, second grill, you've got some criteria to help you make up your mind. And then on the automation, while there's some pros and cons on each one, when it comes down to Wi-Fi, performance, cooking temperature, and most importantly for me, flavor, I think the Auto Ignite is the winner. So those are our three winners of best grilling products for 2024 for grills available in and around $500 US. If you've got any questions about these grills or any other topic, be sure to check out my members live. I go live once a month and you can ask me a question in person, virtually at least, versus these pre-recorded videos. That's it for today. I'm James from Soaking That Barbecue signing off, and remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.